Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Rochester's Math Implementation Journey. I'm Yolanda Perkins, an implementation specialist with the National Implementation Research Network. And we are excited to share the story of how Rochester City School District is transforming math instruction through strategic implementation and collaboration. Ooh. I'm sorry, my slides are going faster than my mouth as I go through. So before we dive in, I just want to give you a few quick housekeeping notes. Please feel free to use the question and answer feature throughout the webinar to ask questions. You'll see that button on the bottom of your Zoom screen. We'll be monitoring it and responding to as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. Also, at the end of today's presentation, we will share a link to the Rochester Implementation Journey multimedia story, which beautifully captures the work and progress of the district. So let's go ahead and get started. As I mentioned, my name is Yolanda Perkins, Implementation Specialist with NERN, and I have the honor of introducing the Rochester team and sharing a little information about our partnership with them. My colleague at NERN and Implementation Associate Stephen McKinney will be facilitating the question and answer session today and closing out today's webinar. But let's get started with the real stars of today. So I'd like to introduce the incredible Rochester City School District math team. They are led by Dr. Nkela Paco, Executive Director of Mathematics, Liz Helbig, Secondary Math Teacher on Assignment, Wilson Burgos, Secondary Math Teacher on Assignment, Sarah Schneider, Elementary Math Teacher on Assignment, and Caitlin Ringer, Professional Learning Specialist. You'll hear from different members of the team throughout today's webinar. But before we begin, let me tell you a little bit about the New York Math Network. Part of Rochester's journey has been participating in the New York Math Network initiative. This is a collaborative effort between NERN and 3 major New York State school districts, Buffalo, Rochester, and Yonkers. And together we're working to transform mathematics instruction by building strong district systems to implement high-quality instructional materials. This network allows us to learn from one another, share resources, and build capacity across districts. So let me tell you a little more about the network. Our approach is designed for lasting impact. First, we focus on building district capacity for sustained implementation. This means creating professional learning models that can be replicated and scaled. Second, we're developing practical tools and resources and establishing an ongoing network to ensure that the work continues beyond the life of the project. And third, our work is based on a co-created implementation plan that supports K-12 math efforts across the district. Now, I want to remind you that this work goes beyond curriculum. It's about building lasting systems that ensure every student receives excellent math instruction. So now let's hear how Rochester is making that vision a reality for all of their students. And I will now turn it over to Dr. Nkela Paco.
Thank you, Yolanda. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm honored to be here with you today and excited to share our journey of improving learning outcome for our students. I will begin by sharing a little bit about us, who we are. The Rochester City School District serves approximately 23,000 students across the beautiful city of Rochester, New York. We are the 3rd largest urban district in New York State with 39 schools, 5 alternative programs, and we are very proud of our rich and diverse student body. Next. At the Rochester City School District, our vision for excellent instruction is rooted in our commitment to provide equitable learning experiences for every child across the district, where they feel seen, affirmed, and valued, engaged in grade level work, and own the thinking. And the last piece is we want them to make progress toward learning. In mathematics specifically, we began our journey asking ourselves, next slide, asking ourselves, what do we want our students to become through mathematics? And we landed in this collective vision. We envision our learners becoming independent, critical thinkers who persevere in solving complex real-world problems, and use mathematics as a tool to understand and positively impact our beautiful communities. And on the next slide, to bring this vision to life, for the past 4 years, our educators, including the elementary educators, a cohesive view of all K-12 educators in the space, leaders and families have worked together to define what do we believe our math learning should be, with a core belief that every child can learn mathematics at the highest levels. We drafted our ideas framework. Students will have opportunities to, the I stands for develop positive mathematical identities, and then engage in deep understanding of mathematics through tools, representations, and discourse, learn in safe and supportive environment. And then the last piece is access grade level content with scaffolds and supports. Even so, even though we drafted collectively our beliefs that will ground our work, we still work to translate them into practice. On the next slide, we identified 3 key instructional shifts called core actions that we hope to bring ideas to life. And the first shift for us is we want math instruction where students are making sense and they are engaging in problem solving strategies. Their teachers are also modeling with mathematics, and so are the learners, where the content is explicit for them. And then discourse to develop understanding. We hope and we believe that our classrooms need to be rich with student voices where they write, talk, and critique each other's thinking. And as we begin with the implementation of IM, I want to capture what Yolanda said. Our journey moved beyond, on the next slide, our journey moved beyond just bringing high quality materials in the hands of the teachers and students, as we truly had a bigger role of building structures of empowerment for our teachers, for our leaders, but also ensuring excellent mathematics education every day for all our students. Of course, little did we know that implementation in itself is not a linear path. And that's where I often say, and we felt as a team, implementation was like a storm boat. It took us a little bit of time to even find the picture to kind of represent that feeling, those sentiments. It's messy, it's unpredictable, and often it's rocky. But we always kept our eyes on the sun. We knew that our main goal was to build those structures and also ensuring excellent math instruction for all students. So the question for me as I dive a little bit deeper in this, telling our story, telling our journey, is how did we navigate all these complexities in terms of implementing a high quality curriculum like illustrative math? So I was very fortunate to have partners in my space, like coming from NERN and coaches to support our learning and our thinking. We as a whole turned to the implementation science to build the capacity needed to sustain the change that we wanted to see. And this work was grounded on the implementation drivers. So the first one, capacity driver, we relied heavily in the beginning of the implementation, as it was more focused, geared toward professional development that we would provide to staff. However, we realized as we're doing this work and analyzing data, which I'll speak a little bit on the later portion, that alone, professional development alone, was insufficient to change adult behavior and to change instructional practice. Further down with the leadership drivers, that was challenging for us as well. As an organization, we had significant turnover, and we continued. That probably was the biggest hurdle that we speak about as we continue to onboard senior leadership, new members, and we continue to strengthen the leadership drivers. The last piece, the organization drivers, that hopefully I can give some examples of. I feel like we relied heavily in the middle of the implementation journey. And that is the place when we start discussing what are the challenges, what are the barriers, how do we collect multiple data points so then we could make informed decisions based on the data that we've collected, based on the needs with implementation. That particular view allowed us to strengthen some of the structures like district implementation team and also our external partnerships, right? What supports did we need to build our own capacity as a district level team so that we could support the implementation. And with that being said, I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into the organization drivers. So we're going to take a look at some of the data, survey data, and classroom data that we collected along the way. So here we're going to break down some of the data that we collected in terms of the teacher self-reported data. So we administered as part of the effective implementation cohort teacher survey twice a year. And this is a specific section of that that deals with the fidelity of materials used. And then in addition to that, we administer the same kind of surveys for our students as well, twice a year, and we continue to collect data and feed on that part. The third kind of set of data that we were very diligent with, it was we conducted instructional rounds systematically all across the schools, all across the classrooms twice a year. And here is some of the data analysis and the findings from those classroom instructional rounds that we conducted. And little as we're moving through the implementation, we saw different kind of things in different perspectives. We saw that interactions between student to students were very limited, and also the focus of instruction was mostly on memorization versus conceptual understanding, limiting the student's ability to make progress and growth over time in mathematics. Furthermore, some of the data pieces that we relied the most on, and this is coming directly from the work that we're doing with NERN at that time, we actually administer the district capacity assessment, which is on the next slide. And this, we administer this every single year, once a year, and this allowed us to collect some more information in terms of where we were with those key components of the implementation science, where we were with our organization pieces or competency pieces. And even in this chart, in this set of data, you can clearly see challenges that we're facing as new leadership was getting onboarded, but also new members of our district implementation team continue to join each year. So then we continue to build their understanding, their capacity to support implementation in informed ways. And then the last piece of the data process and the data collection, it was as part of the work that we are part of the New York network meetings and cohort. We conducted a root cause analysis to help us identify the main strategy to focus for a year. There are multiple strategies that we could have gone on, but we wanted to be informed and land in a strategy that we would concentrate all our efforts. And our strategy for last year was to create a coaching system for teachers and administrators, as that was a lever to actually strengthen the implementation of illustrative math. Lastly, I'm going to touch upon a little bit in terms of how did we think of this as an adaptive change and start building capacity of all our stakeholders. We thought of implementation as a large wave impacting all the layers of organization. And we created this particular slide to kind of show that we needed to kind of impact and touch upon all the stakeholders that were engaging with mathematics. Therefore, our students, families, and communities. So in the next slide, I wanted to very quickly touch upon our efforts to articulate a through line of learning that also captured from administrators, teachers and coaches, students, and then down to the parents and the community members, as we all wanted the support with our main goal to offer and ensure excellent math instruction in all our classrooms. We indeed, on the very last column, I'm excited to share that we actually ended up having a partnership with our two universities that had their own students come in to tutor and mentor our students as early as 5th and 6th grade in our Beyond the Numbers program. And then they move on and they provide support to the Algebra 1 students with illustrative math. So that's a little bit about all the structures that we're trying to put in place and looking at it in a systematic way. So then the change will be sustainable over time. And then in terms of our department, there were some levels of supports that we put in place. And technically, we focus on two areas. The first one is we thought that based on the data that we collected, leveraging the coaching and the professional learning communities in our buildings will be probably the most important lift and system to build to sustain the implementation. So we use certain tools such as the unit and lesson internalization, and also looking at student work. So we had like a particular structure to focus our arc of learning in those particular structures of empowerment, as we call. And then the second lever that we focused our attention on is building site-based leadership capacity and ownership. We identified instructional rounds, learning walks, and then also coaching of the leaders as another way to not only make technical change happen, but make adaptive change happen, shifting the mindsets to get to the improved instruction that it was our long-term goal. And then lastly, this is again as a result of the work that we conducted in our New York network meetings. We built this cascade of coaching, or we call this empowerment structures, where in reality, our teachers on assignment at the district level focus their attention to building the capacity of building coaches. And then with that idea, building coaches, will continue to work with teachers and build their capacity to implement the curriculum and change practice so that our students at the end will experience mathematics in a different way, in a more productive way, as to put. So that was the model that we continue to focus on even in this year, and we have seen some success with that. With that being said, I'm moving us to Wilson Burgos, and he will describe how some of those supports look like on our end.
Hello, Wilson Burgos, teacher on assignment, to talk a little bit about the types of support that we offer our teachers at our schools. The support we provide to teachers and school leaders is guided by instructional rounds that we conduct throughout the year. Once we visit classrooms, we provide feedback and collaborate on next steps with each school. We support school coaches and teachers during their PLCs or through job-embedded coaching. We're grateful for the NERN team for guiding us to develop a walkthrough tool and protocols that help us document what we do and produce quantifiable data to measure the impact of our work. The instructional rounds have made a crucial difference for us. Here's the data from last year's classroom visits for grades 7, 8, Algebra 1, and Geometry. The instructional rounds are not evaluative, and they give us a clarity in regards to the quality of instruction in our classrooms. We always invite other departments that support multilanguage learners and special education. This allows us to norm on the quality of instruction and what leaders should be looking for in order to improve teacher practice. Throughout the year, we make sure that we visit math teachers, including special education, ELL, and bilingual teachers that support math instruction. At each of the instructional rounds, we identify next steps for our district team, for building leaders, and for classroom teachers. This is a summary of the heat map that we use to track how our time is being spent, allowing us to look for patterns and identify areas of focus. Job-embedded teacher support varies by school, as the structure in place at each school is different. Our support includes facilitating PLCs, supporting coaches to plan and facilitate their PLCs, co-planning and lesson internalization with individual teachers or teacher-coach pairs, providing feedback and reflecting on lessons, modeling lessons, supporting coaches to create demo classrooms. The heat map helps us in collecting data as well as to monitor progress in changes to practice. One of our findings from the first set of instructional rounds was that our after-hours district-wide professional learning did not show evidence of change in teacher practice. Job-embedded, while we were a very small team of district coaches, it wasn't until we providing job-embedded support that we directly saw impact on teacher confidence, their mindset, and their teaching practice.
So with the instructional rounds, we use the walkthrough tool, as Wilson said. The first thing that we use as indicators are the two that are here. And we use this to share with our DIT members to norm all of the stakeholders that are invited to attend. In the beginning, this was all that we looked for as we started implementing the curriculum. 2 years ago, we started purchasing workbooks to help leaders know what they should be looking at. And if they don't see this, it can be an indicator that teachers are changing or modifying the materials that move away from the learning intentions of the lessons in the curriculum. The next area of focus that we look at with the walkthrough tool focuses on instructional practices of the teacher. This is when we norm on what we should be seeing in the classrooms versus a traditional math classroom that leadership and teachers are most familiar with. And it allows us to help shift mindsets and improve the quality of instruction. The instructional rounds is the only process that has gotten so much buy-in from leaders, coaches, or teachers because it is a valuable learning experience for all. It gives us the data to diagnose the quality of instruction and then revise what we are doing while we're implementing IM. The process we use is first we unpack the tool with building leaders and ask them to identify 1 to 2 indicators that align with their commitment goal for math or their school improvement plan. After we visit the classrooms, we always start with glows and wonders. Then we dial down to the indicators that the building chose, and we discuss what we saw and what we think. We do this to collect data, but also get us to the next steps that the schools will need. It was through this process that we realized that all of the professional learning, as Wilson said, wasn't helping us. So we need to make sure we change that up. Here's our round 2 data from last school year with intentional and intensive focused supports that we gave to schools and teachers during PLCs and coaching. We were able to shift practice, as you can see from our round 2 data. We also worked weekly with building coaches in high schools who are required to teach Algebra 1. It was through these regular meetings that we discussed implementation of the curriculum and how students responded, brainstorming ways to improve enacting the lessons to ensure access for all students to build the conceptual understandings that they needed to be successful. 2 years ago, when we did our root cause analysis with NERN, we knew we had to change how teachers got the professional learning and that they needed to implement the curriculum effectively. In May 2024, we were working intensively with a school that chose not to use the curriculum and examined their barriers. We also held our first small learning walk with struggling teachers from one of our middle schools. The feedback from this experience led us to develop a plan on a bigger scale to reach all of our schools and teachers using the curriculum in 7th and 9th grade. This year, we invited administrators and teachers, including our SPED and L teachers who are teaching math, to ensure their understanding of the use of the curriculum and alignment of instructional practices. Before teachers go into the classroom, we take all participants through the lesson internalization process. This is when we share the key learnings of the how to internalize a lesson, and we point out the key features in the curriculum that support students with disabilities and multi-language learners. We stress the importance of these instructional practices as best practices and to use with all students to promote access, inclusivity, and address different learning styles and preferences. The feedback from admin and teachers on this experience is powerful. It allowed people to see the possibility for what all of our students are capable of. We also use their feedback to improve the learning walk process over the 4 learning walks we did last year. Now, I mentioned that we encourage and invite all of our SPED and L teachers during CPT learning walks and coaching sessions to ensure their understanding of the use of the curriculum and alignment of the instructional practices. Also, during the lesson internalization, we take into consideration and create some of the supports that could be used. And if you see on the slide there, the considerations and supports, we've housed it in a place that gives access to all of our teachers to be able to see that while internalizing the lesson. And in addition to all the adaptations to the task in collaboration with teachers, including SPED and L, it's shared throughout the entire district.
So I'm going to get us started. So then we build this transitional slide to introduce like how we're using the same concept of building capacity, implementation science, and also structures of empowerment, and how we're scaling then that down to the elementary levels. Sarah, would you like to start with this part?
Absolutely. So, hi, I'm Sarah Snyder, and I'm teacher on assignment for the math department with the K-5 buildings. And I just want to kind of speak very briefly to my own experience as I was part of the pilot group implementing, as a classroom teacher, implementing the illustrative math curriculum. So it's given me a very unique perspective on beginning this journey with the elementary, implementing a new high quality curriculum in the elementary schools. I've just really learned a lot about the intentionality of and all the planning that goes into building the proper structures and teams that allow a greater sense of ownership and just building capacity among building leaders and teachers as well. So we're just starting this journey right now. I don't know if Kayla, you want to add anything on to that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. This slide is animated for a part. We just put like a different feel to it. In addition to what Sarah mentioned, Yolanda, if you click a couple of times, you will see the same exact pieces that we lifted in terms of the core beliefs that we drafted as a community, but also the core instructional practices and the implementation science and the implementation drivers coming together for us to kind of lead the way in terms of how we're thinking about implementation in the elementary levels at this point in time. So thank you, Sarah, for adding that piece. In the next slide, again, we believe that curriculum is a vehicle to improve teacher practice and therefore student outcomes. So we're creating these journeys. And in a similar way, certain structures and certain goals can be easily replicated, whether they're K-5 or even pre-K or high school. This is our through line of learning for our elementary educators, for administrators, teachers, coaches, interventionists. And another key point in there, we were very intentional to design the through line of learning for all of them. There is definitely alignment between 6 to 12, but here we particularly pay close attention to the needs of the families and the needs of the community as we started to have a parent academic advisory group that meets like monthly, and it's kind of establishing that bridge between the schools and the communities. Leading us to, on the next slide, we move on through a selection process for K-5 curriculum selection, which happened all last year. It was a very lengthy process. We ended up including multiple stakeholders. Up to 150 students participated in a pilot phase, and on May 22nd, the board approved iReady Classroom as the curriculum for K-5 for our elementary students. So again, we use the same practices, the same mindset, the same structures to kind of move that work down, scale that work down into the elementary levels. And then Sarah is going to speak a little bit about those empowerment structures that we're trying to build on as we are working with implementing the curriculum for elementary.
So you can see in this diagram that we have, starting with the district implementation team, which is a variety of stakeholders that meets bi-weekly on Fridays. They were, the drivers in picking out the the curriculum we're using, and they continue to meet bi-weekly to really give voice to this. We want to hear different perspectives from different places as we roll out this implementation process. And then we move up to the next level, which is the school leaders, which is the district planning team, and they also meet on Mondays bi-weekly. And then we move up to the content leads, which we have 12 content lead teachers across the district, 2 per grade level, K through 5, and they will be working intensely with myself and our iReady curriculum specialist, so that they can be the leaders in the learning for the next level, which is our district grade level leads. And so at each building, we have 1 grade level lead for each grade level, and they're going to really bring that work of unpacking and understanding the curriculum down to all their teachers in the building, and that's where we're at with the school level professional learning communities, which on a monthly basis, once a month, we will be in the buildings, the math department, myself, and our iReady curriculum specialist supporting that work. And Kayla, if you want to add on to that as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. That's awesome. And then to add to Sarah's points, this systems didn't exist, so we're trying to leverage, build the knowledge and the capacity of the people in the buildings. As we say, like, the implementation needs to be in the buildings, needs to be in the classrooms, and then lending to that building implementation teams that we're hoping that will start kind of supporting schools to do so. They have already identified critical members to be part of that team, but technically we're moving toward that and kind of lifting that up as well. Sarah, I'll mention that in the same regards as the 6 through 9, we do have instructional rounds that we started for our K-5 cohort of schools. And that is also going to run in a very similar format when we conduct them and we identify next steps and the supports that the schools will need that are a little bit more specific to their own dynamic, right? To their own school building and to their own needs and to their own teachers. And with that being said, I wanted to kind of round us up that as Rochester is implementing high quality curriculum, we try to bring alignment to the next generation learning standards that we start implementing in a systematic way, 1 cohort at a time or 1 grade at a time. And you will see, again, our goal is not just to align high quality curriculum materials to actually meet and exceed the standards, the next generation learning standards, but also to ensuring all students graduate in pathways that successfully prepare them for the future. And with that being said, you can see like a progression of our journey. Like in the fall 2021, we start piloting illustrative math in 7 schools in grade 7 and 8. And then we took all that feedback, lesson learned, and then we moved into fall 2022 when we scaled it up to 7th and 8th grade for all our 7th and 8th graders. And then as we move each year, all those red courses in red, as we call, we continue to add more cohorts to our journey, more students that will experience high quality mathematics, whether it's materials, but the goal again was to experience high quality instruction of mathematics every single day. And then as we are entering the fall 2025, we are rolling up the next gen for the Algebra 2. Therefore, Algebra 2 is rolled out, that cohort with illustrative math. In addition, we updated all the other pathways, like we've got some local pathways like Foundations of Geometry, Statistics and Data Science. All those are based on the lessons and the activities from the illustrative math. So we're making every effort to make sure that our students have a consistent, high quality learning experience in every pathway, regardless where they are enrolled to. And then lastly, Yolanda shared the article as well. There were multiple lessons that we learned in this way. It has been by far the most rewarding journey because we got to kind of design the journey of a child from kindergarten through 12th and from kindergarten to 12th grade, like a cohesive high quality journey for a child as they're engaging with mathematics. However, we also like this implementation brought up so many other layers. We discovered change is emotional. It requires a lot of energy on our part. We had a lot of relationships with our teachers and leaders, so we just want to lift it there. Actually, our teacher on assignment, Liz Helbig, always mentioned how emotional this kind of work was. The fact that such a large district with a lot of changes in leadership, we lack the capacity and also the models for sustainability. So we feel like all the time, we feel like we are this architects, right? Building the structures and building the capacity, moving from one layer to the other, because those are not necessarily existent. And it was important to have science of implementation behind and those implementation drivers to kind of guide our thinking through what parts were missing, what parts we're still looking to build. So then the implementation was strengthened, and also the capacity at the building levels was strengthened. And lastly, I spoke a little bit about leadership turnover. We were blessed to have multiple leaders come along in our journey, and they share their talents and skills with us. However, implementation is a long journey. It's a hard journey. It's important to be kind of consistent with it as well. So that definitely pushed us to always rethink the next steps, to rethink the future, to rethink what we needed to do and in what way. Even so, I am excited and I'm positive in the direction that we're heading, as I do believe that we're making headway as an entire group of educators and leaders in this space. Our data continues to show growth in both conceptual understanding and conceptual responses, and also overall proficiency rates are going up. And then hopefully, as we continue this kind of phasing approach with high quality instructional materials, building structures, building systems to support educators in the field, we are hoping and we remain confident that student learning and the outcomes will continue to improve at even a greater rate that we are seeing thus far. So that's where we are optimistic that all of this work, it's going to, in the long run, it's going to yield some better results for all of our students in the RCSD. And as we are closing out our presentation, sharing of our journey, we brought a couple of pictures so then we can come together to you, like give some faces, some life to all the words, all the stories that we shared. As here you're going to see our dedicated educators, whether they are elementary engaging with a new curriculum, or they are secondary folks engaging with illustrative math. In the middle, it was our team from last year, including our NERN coaches, and then our entire team, our entire math department team. So thank you for listening to our story.
All right. Well, we're going to transition into the Q&A portion of today's webinar. But first, I want to give a humongous shout out and thank you to Dr. Paco, Wilson, Liz, Sarah for joining us and highlighting your amazing implementation journey with us. There's a lot to take away from this presentation and what you guys have done over the past couple of years with your journey. So thank you so much. We've got some time for some questions. It looks like we have some questions already coming through within our portal. We encourage you to keep dropping these in here. But Dr. Paco and team, we'll start by highlighting a question from Scott, who asked, what was the basis of your decision to double down and invest in your coaching system and the professional learning community?
I can answer that because we started this process in the very beginning, before the New York network, but NERN was still part of our group. And we had offered a ton of theory-based professional learning, like 50 hours or more for the first couple of years. It was an intense amount of professional learning. And in those first couple of years, we didn't see much change happen at all. And then it was in 2024, May of 2024, when Kayla is like, there's a school that's not using the curriculum. And she sent me and Wilson in to go work with their teachers, and they had sped teachers to like help them see the power. So we started on unit 7 of the curriculum in illustrative math. And it was through that, us doing that, like us putting ourselves out there like that to teach their children and model in front of their children, that we realized how important it was for them to see what it's supposed to look like in action with their own kids. And it also gave us a lot of information about what people really did know about the curriculum, what they didn't know, because we would plan together. And it was really an eye-opening experience. So it was that, plus at the same time, we did our root cause analysis where that happened with NERN as well. And if anybody else wants to add in.
And I will build off what Liz said. That was the time that we're trying to collect multiple data points. So then in terms of the professional development, teachers were reporting change in their understanding of mathematics and practice, because that all the professional development was done outside of work hours, as we call it, contractual hours. But in reality, from the data that we collected from the instructional rounds, as they mentioned, we did not see necessarily any correlation between what they were self-reporting as a change into what the practice was looking like and reflecting. And I think we came to this realization that it's not necessarily intuitive as a curriculum, because sometimes goes in a different directions. Like teachers were part of this narrative how mathematics were taught, right? And then they will teaching the same way as they were taught in a more traditional way. So that in terms of lifting the practice, that required much more support for them to see, to reflect on it, to get feedback. It wasn't as intuitive as you're taking it, materials in front of you. You are an educator, you can go out there in the space, do it. It required a lot of changes, whether it was mindsets or changes in instructional practice. And that in itself, made us pay close attention to what other supports teachers will need to make this happen in the way it was intended.
And I'm just going to add, unless somebody else wants to, teachers in their defense, because the curriculum did look different, they thought they were doing something different. So because it was different than anything they'd ever had in front of them, they felt like they were doing the thing. Even when we had the next year we had coaches across the district, we also learned that even our best teachers that we had, our coaches, weren't at the place we needed them to be. And so we had to coach them up. And that was part of the doubling down so that they could coach the people in their building.
Awesome. Thank you, team, for the in-depth answer. We'll go back to the chat here. We have 2 questions from Jingyeon that were added during the K through 5 slides. They say, thank you so much for the presentation. How did the team decide which math curriculum to implement? And then relatedly, they would like to know more about who provides initial training and coaching. Is it someone from the iReady team?
Thank you. That's a wonderful question. So we had a 9-month selection process for selecting a curriculum that will meet the needs of Rochester. We worked with Yolanda and Nern to kind of create a space for all our members to build their capacity, because we did it in phases. We had 16 different programs apply for the RFP. That's our process by which we go out to seek new programs. And then we developed teams, either were teams of teachers, teams of coaches, teams of principals. We had a parent committee to kind of vet out that resource. As we realized, as we're building capacity and creating the spaces, we narrow down the list of what do we want learning to look like for the Rochester students. And then we determine, what was the list of must-haves for any program that would meet the needs of our kids, K-5. And because it was such an intense kind of journey for all of us, math department led that process. We had tons of support from the NERN coaches to kind of help us in the selection process, building the right structures in there so then we could land into a program that we felt that it met the needs of our families, it met the needs of our teachers, it met the needs of our students, and also aligned to the problem-based program that we intentionally have selected for 6 through 12. So that's the first portion. That's the chart that I showed, all those levels and all the people, including students. We engaged in a pilot phase as well to determine if even after we were clear in terms of what must-have certain program was meeting, right? Because we're vetting that out. Even in that process, we still move forward to do a pilot phase and to allow teachers and students to engage with it and parents and see how appropriate this materials, this curriculum, this program was for all of our classrooms, for all of our students. And because we were so much versatile into the implementation science with illustrative math and those structures that we're thinking, currently we have a combination. To Sarah's point, we have an iReady specialist that is supporting implementation. At the same time, concurrently, we're building capacity in the buildings, right? We've got content leads, grade level leads. We're doing the same with the principals. We're building their capacity to understand. So it's not, I feel like we learned some lessons when we started IM that we expected. I call it, we expected guests to run the house, but guests will come and go, right? So now we're trying to concurrently work together, and trying to build the capacity, use the specialists to build our capacity, right? Move the training forward, develop somebody else somebody else will kind of multiply the impact in other spaces. So right now it's like it's happening at both ends. The consultant is helping me, Sarah, and the entire team, and then we continue to help other layers. So we continue to grow and try to build the capacity of more people along the journey, along the way.
And then, Kayla, if I can add a little bit onto that as well, I just want to give the Rochester team another highlight. One of the things that they did in their selection process for K5 is they utilized the NERD hexagon tool process. And so they took the implementation science learning that they've had over the time and apply that to that process. So as Dr. Paco was mentioning how that was done, we're getting different critical perspectives to share what their thoughts were about the curriculum, as well as ensuring that the curriculum that was selected actually fit the need. So they looked at fit, a need, they looked at the feasibility, and they looked at all of those, getting different perspectives to ensure that they were making a selection that would meet the needs of their teachers and their students.
And no disrespect to Scott's question, but Patty has a question in the Q&A too, which goes with that. She wants to know why we started with middle school. It wasn't a choice of ours. And Kayla had just come into the district as our new director of math, and it was something she was told to apply for an implementing with the Gates grant. So that's how we started, and it was offered to middle schools. So when we were in it, we saw the connections, like, oh my gosh, we're doing 7th and 8th, but 6, 7, 8, 9 is so connected. And that's when we're like, everything builds off of one another. So we went and opened it up to go from 6 to algebra, then to geometry the next year, and then this year is algebra 2.
And I will build off what Liz said. In addition to that, like we felt, it was the beginning as we found the opportunity to engage in the effective implementation cohort work that lasted for 3 years and a little bit longer than that, and into the extension. We also felt like that middle grades, they were missing so many things. We were missing so many things. There wasn't necessarily like a solid, even a high quality curriculum that we could look at. We have gone so far off the map with that one. So it definitely had a critical need to kind of start looking at it in a more systematic way and just start saying, how can we lift up the instruction of mathematics in middle grades? As we know, algebra is still the gatekeeper of all the things, moving forth. So we wanted to start being intentional. When do we start the change, and how quickly we could impact those new cohorts that we were entering in 9th grade in a systematic way. and in an intentional way as well. So I'm so excited that we started there, because it allows us to grow and learn together, to learn all those lessons, and hopefully we can move some of those learned experiences down to K-5 in a more intentional and systematic way. So I'm excited that this unintentionally happened this way, because it did support our journey, and in the long run is going to support our students as they are moving on into different grade levels toward graduation.
All right, it looks like we have time for a couple more questions. I want to go back to Scott, who says in our portal here, what an incredibly well-developed teaming approach. He mentions slide 41 with the cascade. Could you talk about how you approached developing building/teacher readiness and buy-in for this implementation project through teams, through your teaming approach?
Liz, do you want me to start just setting the stage, and then hopefully you and Wilson can add a little bit to it? Um, I think for us, it was eye-opening when we started doing some, like I, as a leader in this role, started doing some of the work with the New York network, that this idea of multiplying our efforts was introduced as a cascade of coaching. And that's when we realized it's like, what would be the priority schools? We do have some schools that have special designations, like they require additional support. What would be priority schools? What are the levels of supports in those priority schools? And how can we align the leadership in those schools to support building the capacity of a coach, right? Building the capacity of a team. So I, on my end, was trying to align all those efforts, that their goals for their school improvement plans were fully aligned, and the actions were fully aligned to our actions that we're doing on our end and our strategies. So I was more intentional in terms of securing a partnership with leadership in those buildings to get the project off and running. And then I know that Liz and Wilson, they have very strong relationships with the teachers in these buildings and the coaches in these buildings. So I think probably that was another layer, that knowing the audience so well, knowing that our goals were fully aligned with what they were hoping to get as a result of implementing a new curriculum or receiving coaching. I think probably they added to our favor, to continue to do the commitment work that we called it, not necessarily buy-in, but it was a commitment work. So Liz and/or Wilson.
I would say to add to that, not just we started with using our relationship with people we already knew, teachers and leaders in the buildings, but also we had a large focus on empowering teachers at the building. So we created teams and created teacher leaders from people who had not been leaders before, but we empowered them to come along with us in that journey, and teachers really stepped up and helped our message. We had a common message, and it was teachers that helped us deliver that message, because three of us weren't going to do that in a district as large as ours. Liz?
I just want to add, they make it sound like it happened overnight, but when we started to implement into 9th grade and 6th grade, I was thinking I would get the most flack from 6th grade teachers, but that wasn't who, like when we talk about emotional, it was high school teachers, especially in 9th grade, where we ran up, even if we had a relationship, they were like, didn't want to do it. So that's when we had to kind of really get a team of people, like I call it the coalition of the willing. So who are the people that are willing to do what we need them to do, right? Instead of working with the ones that we're up against, and build it from and show results that happen because of utilizing the high quality instructional material, and then build on to the teaching pedagogy part, the pedagogical part of the curriculum.
Thanks, Liz and team. Scott also has a question. Well, he first says he loves the ship on the water image. It's clear. It's a great visual for the implementation process. I agree, Scott. Regarding the DCA results over the 3 years and on that slide, wondering if you could talk through making headway with the ups and downs of messy implementation.
That's a great question for our team. So when we do the district implementation, district capacity assessment, that is conducted with our district implementation team members. And because we had changes, shifts, even the chief academic officer that was sitting in some of these meetings, like they changed. And also we have a coordinator of coaching that wasn't before, like we have shifts in terms of the members of the team. Some of the members were not necessarily versatile in all the pieces of the implementation. And I think that's most likely what this shows, the data shows. And I'll give you an example, like certain components we drop down. Like for example, decision supports data system, right? That was different leadership required certain data pieces to be in a certain space. And that wasn't necessarily that falls off in a different year. That wasn't necessarily a requirement. So it wasn't necessarily easily and readily available to us. So all the members of the team felt that that particular component, it wasn't necessarily as lifted as the previous year. So I'm saying that like even a barrier so little, it's friction, right? Because it shows that we were not stable in our understanding of all the components, including training, the coaching, right? Systems of intervention, all the things that we're building, because the actual members were new to the work that we're doing and they weren't necessarily versatile on all those pieces. And then what was the other portion, Stephen, if you can repeat?
I do want to add while you're
Go
looking
ahead.
for that,
Yep.
because after that last DCA meeting that you see that, Yolanda, who has been a consistent throughout the whole process, she was the one who's always delivered the DCA, actually highlighted the parts that we did, like that we actually were improving on, and that was helpful for her to do that too as well, even though some of the data might not have shown that. She did highlight that because she was with us the whole entire time.
Thank you, Liz.
And Dr. Paco, I think you did answer the question. They were asking about just talking about headway, ups and downs throughout MESI implementation related to the DCA. I'm looking at the clock here. We have 3 minutes to go and we'll make sure we have time to close out our time together. So we will transition into our closing slides. Thanks so much, Yolanda. Okay, so again, want to give a huge shout out to the Rochester team. Thank you so much for being with us and highlighting this journey. We have a couple of resources here that we will drop into the chat. If you would like to read more about Rochester's journey, as part of the New York Math Network, we have published their story on a website, which you can read more about within this link. If you would like to read more about the New York Math Network project as a whole and the network between Rochester, Buffalo, and Yonkers, we have that linked here as well. And of course, we have our NERN website linked, in which you could go and read all about NERN and all things implementation science. And then additionally, we have linked here our NERN Active Implementation Hub. This is a great resource for all things implementation. We have over 200 resources on our hub about the frameworks, building capacity with implementation. This is a great resource for your implementation journey. And then we also have a brand new NERN implementation team training program, which we recently launched. If you or your team would like to work with us on building your team's capacity for implementation, you can find that link in the chat as well. Please feel free to contact us for more information on that front. And then lastly, we have our socials listed here. We are on Facebook and LinkedIn. We have our website listed as well. If you are looking for implementation support, like we said, we have this request form that you can fill out. We'll be in touch. We'd love to work with you. So again, as we depart this space today, please give a huge shout out to the Rochester team. Dr. Paco, Wilson, Liz, Sarah, thank you. Such a pleasure. And with 1 minute left, have a great rest of your week, and thanks for being with us.